Today. So today's topic, we're still on monopoly, but today we want to talk about the revenue curves of a monopolist. So we said a monopoly is a single seller or a single provider of service in an industry. So definitely we're talking about a firm that is itself the industry. That is what a monopoly is, because we said an industry is what the combination of different firms. In as such as we have a monopolist, it means the firm itself is the monopoly. That means the industry itself is the monopolist. So here they go. A monopoly firm is itself the industry. So what does that imply? It means that the firm we're talking about, the business we're talking about, the company we're talking about, it's the only industry. So as the industry faces a downward sloping demand curve, so does the monopolist. So the demand curve of a monopolist is downward slope. So as soon as it faces a downward sloping demand curve, it immediately affects the monopolist itself. So what is the implication of this? The implication is that a monopolist cannot increase price at the same time increase sales. So if a monopolist wants to increase price, it must reduce. If a monopolist wants to increase price, it means its sales must reduce. And if it needs to increase its sales, it has to reduce the price. So let's see what they wrote here. They said, so does the monopoly. So it can therefore only increase sales by reducing price or increase price by reducing sales. That's what I just said now. So for a monopolist, if it starts facing a downward sloping demand curve, there's no way it could increase price at the same time increase sales. So it has to be opportunity cost. Either as a monopolist, you increase the price so that your sales will reduce because it's a downward sloping demand curve, or you reduce the price to increase your sales. So it can set either price or output, but not both. So as a monopolist, you can't set the price and output at the same time. It's either you set the price or you set the output. So if it sets the price, then the demand curve shows how many should be sold. So as a monopolist, if a monopolist is setting the price, it means it's determining the quantity of output that will be sold. So if it sets the output, then the demand curve shows what price it needs to charge to sell all the output. So it is this way. If you as a monopoly, you set the price. When you are setting the price, what happens when you set the price? It means the demand curve will show so as I was saying, for a monopolist, it can't do two things at a time. If a monopolist is setting the price, if it's setting the price, it means it wants to ensure that the output that will be sold will be known. That is why it's setting the price. That's what it said. If it sets the price, then the demand curve shows how many should be sold. So if you are setting the price of a product, definitely you will be able to know how much you will be selling. But if, as a monopolist, you want to set the output, then the demand curve itself will show the price that you need to charge to be able to sell all the output. That is the point there. So the demand curve shows the quantity bought at any given price. We already know what demand is, the quantity of goods or services that an individual is willing to buy at a given price and time. So that means the demand curve will definitely show the quantity bought at any given price. So that's about revenue curve now. So let's look at the implication of the revenue curve here. Here is the revenue curves of a monopolist. A monopolist, being the sole supplier in the industry, faces a downward sloping demand or average revenue curve. Marginal revenue falls at twice the rate of average revenue and becomes zero when total revenue is maximized. So what are they trying to say here? As long as a monopolist faces a downward sloping demand curve, the total revenue make will fall. As soon as the total revenue is falling, the marginal revenue will fall at twice as twice as marginal revenue. And to obtain the average revenue will be at zero when the total revenue is maximized. So look at the graph here. You get to know it better now. So let's say the price is at 12. So the total revenue made there for that quantity is 12 multiplied by 2. Okay. Now the prices fall. The total revenue falls from 12 to 8. So as soon as it falls from 12 to 8, what happens with marginal revenue? The marginal revenue, they said the marginal revenue falls twice as the rate of the average revenue. So if the total revenue falls from 12 to 8, that means the average, the marginal revenue would have fallen twice. That means 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So look at the graph here. So let's go down like that. So as soon as the total revenue falls from 12 to 8, the marginal revenue has fallen from 12 to 4, from 12 to 8, the total revenue has, the average revenue has, the marginal revenue, sorry, has fallen double. That means 8 divided by 12 by 2, which is 4. So what happens at the end of it all? For a monopolist to maximize its total revenue, it needs to have an average revenue which has to become 0. So how do we get our average revenue? We said total revenue, average revenue is total revenue divided by output. And we said for a monopoly, as soon as the marginal revenue falls as twice the rate of the average revenue and becomes 0 when the total revenue is maximized. So the total revenue can only be maximized if the average revenue falls to 0. So how do we get to know the average revenue here? We said marginal revenue, or marginal revenue, which is what? The total amount of money made at the cost of producing an extra unit of output. That is marginal revenue. Our total revenue is our price multiplied by quantity, or price multiplied by the output sold. So here, our total revenue is at this point. This is our total revenue. And we said our average revenue, which is total revenue divided by output. So total revenue is 5, and the output, the output is 5. The total revenue here is at 0. So our average revenue will be total output multiplied by total revenue, which is 0 and 5. So our average revenue is total revenue output multiplied by 0, which is 5 multiplied by 0. So that's why we have our average revenue to be 0, because we said total revenue is average revenue divided by output. So if average revenue is total revenue divided by output, it means output multiplied by average revenue will give us our total revenue. So which is the same as saying total revenue multiplied by output is average revenue. So total revenue for our output is 5. Total revenue is at 0 here, so which is 0 multiplied by 5, which is 0. That is the point made there. So that's about the revenue curve. So as soon as the revenue curve of a monopolist falls downward, slope downward, it affects the revenue of the monopolist. And it does not only affect the revenue of the monopolist, it also doubles. The marginal revenue falls twice as the total revenue will fall. So that is the point. The point here is that as soon as the total revenue of a monopolist falls, the marginal revenue will fall twice as the total revenue. Then we'll go on to the profit maximizing equilibrium output. So for a monopolist, the monopolist will maximize profit in the short run when the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. So here they said the neoclassical theory of the firm assumes that a monopolist will be a short run profit maximizer. This means that it will produce where MC equals to MR. So we go on. So we have the figure below, but I'm going to explain it with the points here. They said the equilibrium profit maximizing level of output is OA, where MC equals to MR. So let's look at the graph here. So based on the graph here, the equilibrium level of output is at OA. So as soon as the firm, a monopolist produces at OA, that means it will be able to maximize profit within the short period of time. So that means our MC equals to MR at OA. That is the first point there. So the equilibrium profit level maximizing output is at OA. Producing at OA will mean that our marginal cost equals to our marginal revenue at this point. At this point I am here. So that's the first point. Then the second point. So they said the price will be OE. The price will be OE. Buyers are prepared to pay OE for this output. So what does this mean? So let's go back to the graph again. At the price OE, because we said a monopolist will be producing at the level at the profit maximizing level of output at OA. It means it's going to be selling at OA. For a monopolist to sell at OE, it means that buyers are prepared to pay the price OE. So for a monopolist to achieve profit equilibrium maximization of profit maximizing equilibrium, it has to sell at OE and produce at OA. So producing at OA and selling at OE would make our marginal cost equals to our marginal revenue. That is the point. So to maximize profit in the short run, a monopolist must produce at output of OA and sell at the price of OE. Then how will a monopolist make a supernormal profit? For a monopolist to make a supernormal profit, it has to sell. So for a monopolist to make a supernormal profit, it has to charge what here? They said it will be based on. So the monopolist will maximize profit by producing where MC is. We talked about that. So it will base its price on its average revenue curve, charging OE. It will be able to earn supernormal profits of EFGC because average revenue is greater than the average cost at that level of output. So before we go down here, a supernormal profit of EFGC will be made. The supernormal profit per unit will be GF. Is the difference between the AF and AG. So at GF, what happens at GF? At GF, that's a supernormal profit. So a firm charging at OE we need to make a supernormal profit, it has to produce an output of EFGC. So by selling at OE and producing at EFGC, then the monopolist will be able to make a supernormal profit. So at that point in time, how is it going to be able to make a supernormal profit? It will be able to make a supernormal profit because the average revenue is more than the average cost. So look at the average revenue curve here. This is the average revenue curve. The average revenue curve is higher than the average cost. The average revenue is higher than the average cost. So that means the average revenue, the average cost is below the average revenue. So this is when a monopolist is making a supernormal profit. That means it's producing at EFGC. So note that EFGC is a supernormal profit because economic cost includes an allowance for normal profit. Note that price is not equal to the intersection of the MC and MR curve. That is prices. So look at the MC and MR curve here. Price is not equal at the intersection. Yes, it's not equal. But what is certain here is that a monopolist is going to be able to make a supernormal profit at ECFG, which is certain here, selling at OE. Then it is able to do that because it's able to have an average revenue that is greater or higher than the average cost of production. So that's about that. Thank you.